In May of this year, NASCAR returned to the North Wilkesboro Speedway for the first time in 27 years. This came as a major shock to most. Despite being a founding track for NASCAR, it seemed like such a dilapidated track would never see another lap of competition ever again. But even those who were in the loop and followed the rumblings and rumors every step of the way probably don't know how many dozens of things had to go right in order to get us from this to this. It wasn't the work of a few people with some money and a dream. It wasn't any one thing or any one person that made this happen. This was instead a perfect storm of circumstances that all culminated into the revival of this little piece of motorsports history. It involved the highest levels of the American government, a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic and the resulting fallout, and tens of thousands of people that never gave up hope that this track could come back to life. So let's delve into the who, the what, the how, and the why, because the revival of the North Wilkesboro Speedway deserves a closer look. Wilkes County, North Carolina is about as old as the United States itself. Founded in 1778 in the midst of the Revolutionary War, Wilkes was a backwater county tucked away into the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. By royal decree, no American was allowed to settle the lands beyond those mountains, lest the crown upset the natives on the other side that they had established treaties with. But that didn't stop our ancestors, and Wilkes County became the last pit stop for any pioneer venturing into the poorly mapped regions beyond. Wilkesboro and many other mountain towns can trace their origins to this time period, and they quickly gained a reputation for helping people across the Appalachians and ignoring laws they just didn't like. They were poor enough and far enough away from the coastal cities that governments didn't really bother to enforce the laws anyway, as there was rarely anything for them to gain from it. That attitude of the people in these towns never really went away, and when the Volstead Act was passed in 1919 and national prohibition took place, well, Wilkes County was in the perfect position to supply the nation with all the illegal spirits they could drink. They called their clear, unaged corn whiskey White Lightning, or moonshine, as it was made in the dead of night under the light of the moon. Local law enforcement, just like in the 1700s, didn't bother to enforce the federal law, because they either couldn't afford to, didn't want to, or were paid off by local moonshiners. Moonshining was so ubiquitous in Wilkes County that a young bootlegger named Junior Johnston said that on a fall evening when all the leaves fell, you could look up at the mountains and see all the still fires burning on the hillsides. There were so many that he never bothered to count how many there were because it seemed like there were as many as there were stars in the sky. But making the moonshine was the easy part. Getting it out of Wilkes County and into the cities to sell it is where things got difficult. Luckily, the automobile had just been brought into mass production right before Prohibition, and now anyone with a little bit of cash could get their hands on one, and a trip that used to take an entire day by horse could now be done in an hour. But cops had cars now too at their disposal. In order to outrun any authorities that did adhere to federal law, moonshiners souped up their cars to go faster than their log dog counterparts. The average police cruiser was stock save for some flashing lights, but bootleggers would drop hefty V8s into little coupes and modify their suspensions to deal with the 100 or so gallons of illegal hooch in the trunk. Since the shine was usually kept in glass jars, rum runners didn't have to just be fast, but delicate as well, so they didn't lose their product along the way. Shine runners in Wilkes County became renowned for their ability to evade law and bring their product to market in one piece. Although Prohibition was revoked federally in 1933, several dry counties and states remained, and their citizens still had a thirst. So rum runners were there to answer the call yet again. But now with federal revenuers on their tail for not paying taxes. A minor clerical squabble to be sure, but still legends grew out of Wilkes County. And after World War II, the number of dry counties was dwindling. But those shine hustlers and veterans now had an appetite for speed that had to go somewhere. Cars were as cheap as they'd ever been, and a local man named Enoch Staley, whose family may or may not have been running stills in that area for decades, built a track for them to race on in North Wilkesboro in 1947. It was around 5/8 of a mile, but it wasn't built up to a professional standard. Enoch and some local construction guys had put it up over the course of months, doing it when they had time off from their day jobs. So the front stretch went downhill and the back stretch went uphill, giving the short oval a lot of character. Racers from all over the South flocked to North Wilkesboro for its big prizes and history. And when the first season of NASCAR Cup Series kicked off in 1949, North Wilkesboro was the perfect venue to hit up. It was a mainstay of the NASCAR Cup Series schedule from then until 1996. That was when a pseudo-partnership between Bruton Smith and Bob Bear emerged to take the track away from the Staley family. Bob Baer had built the New Hampshire Speedway in 1990, and it had been added to the Cup Series schedule in 1993. But he wants a second date for the rapidly growing facility. Bruton Smith was in the process of building Texas Motor Speedway and wanted a guaranteed race date. North Wilkesboro Speedway had 2 races on the schedule, so both businessmen agreed to split the 2 dates between them. When it was announced that North Wilkesboro would not return to top division NASCAR competition, locals who were intensely loyal to the track held hope that lower divisions would continue racing there. Modifieds, Xfinity, and the newly formed Truck Series had all raced there before, so they could keep the place afloat. But Baer and Smith owned the track jointly from 1996 to 2007. Thus, if anything were going to be done with the track, it would require both businessmen to agree. The problem was Baer and Smith detested one another, and their egos clashed constantly. It wasn't until 2007, when Smith bought out Baer's New Hampshire Motor Speedway, that Bruton got full ownership of North Wilkesboro under his company, Speedway Motorsports Incorporated. But Bruton had bigger fish to fry and simply let the track rot out in the foothills of western North Carolina. The property, valued anywhere between $4 and $12 million, was used exclusively as a tax write-off for decades. There was one hero who had emerged from the ashes, though. Paul Kolb came from a family of moonshiners and actually lived on the track property. As such, he found himself being written into the sale contract as the track's sole employee. For years and years, he did what he could to keep the track up, but there was only so much one aging man could do against the slow, steady march of Father Time and Mother Nature. Nevertheless, he did his best to keep them at bay and saved entire sections of the track. North Wilkesboro saw itself appear on TV a few times and was casually mentioned from time to time as a neat project to bring back an original NASCAR track. But nothing ever came of those talks, and the track continued to slip away. Years after its closure, sometime in summer of 2009, Bruton Smith was asked if he had any plans for the facility. Was it to be revived, demolished, or what? He simply replied, "I think it's returning to the earth." North Wilkesboro was so remote that it wasn't worth it to demolish and sell off to a real estate developer, nor was it seen as profitable enough as a smaller track with a max capacity of just 30,000. You'd think this is where we jump ahead to the 2020s, but not yet. 2010 saw one abortive attempt at the future when Terry Parsons, the widow of Wilkes County native and NASCAR champion Benny Parsons, got some investors together and leased the track from Bruton Smith. The past late model series as well as the USAR Pro Cup series both signed up for races in 2010, along with modified and street stock races as prelim events. And in 2011, PASS will have their season opener there. Dubbed simply as The Race, it paid $75,000 to win, and 77 cars showed up to make the 44-car field. But weather delays plagued the event, and by April of 2011, deals fell apart, and the track would not see a race for another decade. That was seen as the final blow. An attempt was made, and it had failed, proving all the naysayers right. This track was just never going to come back. Things had changed, and it wasn't going to fit in with the new world we found ourselves in. But, as it turned out, the world changing was exactly what that track needed. In 2018, YouTuber Bright Sun Films made a video showcasing the track and its decay over the years, sharing its story with hundreds of thousands of people who weren't even NASCAR fans. This then started a wave of urban exploration enthusiasts who went to the track in person to look around and make videos about it themselves, thus drawing in even more attention. Some people even went so far as to illegally break into the track when Paul Call wouldn't grant permission for one reason or another. In 2019, Dale Earnhardt Jr. announces that he's going to North Wilkesboro with some volunteers to spruce the place up a bit so a laser scan can be made of the track for iRacing. It doesn't hurt that he's also in the midst of producing his own web series called Lost Speedways, where he explores old abandoned tracks all over the country, and North Wilkesboro makes a few mentions here and there. And here's where I come in. Yeah, not to toot my own horn too much, but I do think I put a little pressure on the scales with my pinky finger. It just so happened that when Dale Earnhardt Jr. was out there whacking weeds, I was doing my own video on another old abandoned track, Airbase Speedway. The trilogy of videos I made about that track, and the subsequent media interest with the bounty I put up for more info and pictures, was the single biggest day in the history of my channel. Within the first month, those 3 videos had well over 1 million views all put together, at a time when I only had 17,000 subscribers. To this day, you can clearly see when the Airbase Speedway trilogy happened on my channel. In a matter of weeks, my channel effectively doubled in size. With all of the momentum in the world on my side, and another 20,000 people now subscribed, I knew my next video was going to be important. I had the opportunity to do something now if I wanted to, so I made a video about North Wilkesboro Speedway, and laid out what I thought was a pretty compelling case for it to make a comeback. Within a month, that video had over 200,000 views, and would continue to rake in hundreds of thousands of more views over the next few years. And just like in the Airbase Speedway videos, there was a call to action. get on social media and respectfully put it in the ear of some higher-ups that North Wilkesboro being revived would be a great idea. In 2015, Bruton Smith stepped down as CEO of his company, and his son Marcus Smith stepped up to take the reins. And it just so happened that Marcus was open to new off-the-wall ideas. He wanted to revive the Nashville Fairgrounds and turn the Fall Charlotte race into must-watch TV with the Roval. If anyone at Speedway Motorsports Incorporated was going to give North Wilkesboro a third shot, it was Marcus Smith, and I added his contact info to the video. I don't know if he ever saw that video, but cryptic tweets from him would pop up every so often and generate more and more buzz surrounding the Speedway. But why now? Why did I think this was going to work in 2019 when it didn't work back in 2011? Well, we are currently in the third generation of social media as we know it. Back in 2011, we were in the second. Sites like YouTube and Facebook were ubiquitous, but there wasn't any real money in them, and the term influencer didn't really exist yet. Fast forward to 2019, and Facebook and Twitter are publicly traded corporations, and YouTube employs tens of thousands of content creators who either use it as a full-time job or supplemental income. There's big money to be made now, and social media and the people who make up its landscape are a bigger part of our lives now than ever before. Getting the necessary buzz for a North Wilkesboro revival to be successful wasn't going to happen in 2011, but it could happen in 2019. But in 2020, it looked like that would be delayed again. The pandemic and subsequent lockdowns made our economy permanently veer in a different direction. Millions were left to pick up the pieces and make sense of the landscape they now found themselves in. To help people get back on their feet, the government swooped in and allocated billions of dollars to prop up the country until this blew over. Some of these programs were dumb, like giving bailouts to a cruise ship industry that doesn't even call America home and wasn't going to see any new customers for a year or two. But other programs were great, like giving people their tax dollars back and spending that money how they saw fit. In 2021, President Joe Biden signed into law a COVID relief package that gave billions of dollars to the states and let them decide how it was spent. Now, I'm more in the camp that if we're just going to be handing out money, then we should let the market decide. And by the market, I mean the people. Give us our taxes back and we'll figure out the rest. But that makes too much sense, so instead we gave it to the states so they can hand it out to their crony friends in business, constituents in business. Yeah, definitely no bribery or anything nefarious going on here where there's billions of dollars just being thrown around to the highest bidder, right? Yep, nothing to see here, move along. But one business constituent of North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper was apparently Marcus Smith. I don't know what kind of pull SMI has with the North Carolina state government, but they obviously have some, because tens of millions went to SMI's properties like Charlotte Motor Speedway and, most excitingly, North Wilkesboro Speedway. Marcus Smith also put up millions of his own money for the project, and by late 2022, there was racing at North Wilkesboro yet again. Marcus Smith had sold this to the governor on the idea that he would get Wilkes County back up on its feet. The whole county had been mollywopped by the Speedway closing down, a Lowe's distribution center moving across state lines, and a glass manufacturing plant moving overseas. They needed some help, and Marcus Smith promised to give it to them. And in August of 2022, there it was. A Cars Tour late model race was held with Dale Jr., Brendan Queen, Carson Quapple, and virtually every other big league late model racer in the South traveling down to that race at the historic track. Temporary LED lights were put up to hold the race at night, the stands were packed, and social media was alight with activity. It was back. So back that 2 months later, Marcus Smith announced with Dale Jr. that NASCAR's All-Star race would be held at North Wilkesboro in May of 2023, taking it away from Texas Motor Speedway, one of the tracks that had killed it off back in 1996. You cannot get more poetic than that. The Cars Tour was also coming back, as well as the NASCAR Truck Series, and finally, after 27 years of trying and failing and trying again and again, North Wilkesboro Speedway had risen from the dead. It just didn't even feel real as I watched the update videos on YouTube and saw the renovations made in real time. Even as I got in my car and drove to the track the Friday before the race, I couldn't believe it was real. Not until I walked through the pavilion, heard a truck roar down pit road off in the distance, showed my ticket, and walked through the gate to see a real deal current year NASCAR truck rip around the 5/8 of a mile track for qualifying, did I finally say to myself, holy shit, this is actually happening. It was real. And I walked around the track before and after the races in sheer amazement for the rest of the weekend. After so much, it was back and fans were packed in shoulder to shoulder. The much worn up traffic that had plagued big events in the past was actually not that bad. I was out in a matter of 30 minutes or so. Not nearly as bad as some of my experiences at bigger tracks with much better infrastructure like Atlanta and Charlotte. The NASCAR All-Star race was okay, but the Cars Tour and trucks stole the show with great racing. Classic short track battles erupted all throughout the field, and the Cup Series short track package has left fans wanting for exciting racing for over a year now. So it was much more the fault of a bad car package and a questionable race format than the track itself. And all of the history on display, all of the buzz, all of the pomp and circumstance meant that every single person there looked as happy as a clam. Usually at any race, there's some humbug people, some sticks in the mud, that wish they'd rather be fishing or something, vetching about how stupid some aspect of the schedule is or just complaining about whatever. But that weekend, everyone was absolutely stoked to be there. Everyone had a smile on their face. There wasn't a negative word to be said, and people were already talking about coming back next year and planning out their trips. It took a failed attempt, endless media coverage, thousands of locals never giving up the fight, hundreds of thousands more online constantly generating engagement, the sport's biggest star fighting for it, a number of YouTubers insisting on bringing it up time and time again, and a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic and the resulting government programs to do it. But baby, we are so back. We have never been more back than we are right now. There are some kinks to work out, sure. There is a question of whether or not this momentum fizzles out eventually. I mean, nothing lasts forever, right? But for now, let's just take a step back and marvel of what we race fans are capable of. With our mindset to it, and a little money in the right hands and those people being willing to listen, we can all do some pretty crazy stuff every once in a while. And maybe, just maybe, we can keep those booming real estate markets at bay. The uncaring coldness of the universe once again falls to the indomitable human spirit. There are those who said this day would never come. What are they to say now? Anyway, I'm Slapshoes, thanks for watching, and until next time, never give up the fight, race fans.